Terrific. All right. Thank you. Welcome to the September board meeting for La Plata Electric Association. Let's go ahead and start the meeting with Pledge of Allegiance. If you don't mind standing, please. I pledge allegiance
to the
flag
the flag
of the United
United
States
States
of America,
and the republic
to the republic
stands
for which it stands,
stands
one
one
nation,
nation
under
under
God,
God,
with liberty and
liberty
with liberty and justice for all.
for all.
Terrific. Thank you. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order, and we're going to need a motion to approve the agenda, but I believe we're going to have a modification to that agenda. If somebody wants to make that motion.
I move that we approve the agenda with an amendment of bumping the Tri-State Redesign Committee conversation up into our dashboard, right after our dashboard discussion.
Okay. Second. Terrific. Thank you, Ted. All in favor? Hand up, say aye. Terrific. All opposed? All abstained? Outstanding. Okay, let's open up for member comments and concerns.
John, you want me to go through our quick spiel on that?
Please
All
do.
right. The board encourages comments about the cooperative from its members. The board asks that each participant's comment pertain to cooperative business. Those wanting to address the board during the public comment period are granted 5 minutes to address their topics. Lengthy comments to the board should be submitted in writing. Formal complaints should be filed according to board policy. Comments from the public will be directed at the entire board, not any individual, and no personal attacks shall be allowed. Failure to follow these requirements may cause the public comment period to be terminated. Copies of our policies are available on our website.
Perfect. Okay, anybody from public, anybody wishing to speak from the public? Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next item for the board consent items. As usual, if anybody would like to pop one of these out for individual discussions, please raise your hand and let us know. Kohler, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'll make a move to approve the consent board items, but I do have one typo in the minutes. I don't believe we should pull it just for that typo.
Okay. We get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor to approve the consent board items, hold your hand up, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All opposed? All abstained? Okay, thank you. Consent board items.
Kohler,
John, can I just bring up that?
Yeah,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to say,
Can
Kohler,
I bring
could
up
you
that
give us
one?
Yeah.
Yeah, on page 3 of 4 of the minutes, page 478 of the documents, under the appointment delegate alternate to NRECA, the motion says Director McInnes nominated Director Wheeler at the NRECA. At should be as. And that's the only change I see. Thank you.
We'll make that change. Thanks, Kohler.
Terrific, thank you. Okay, let's hear from the CEO and staff division. Let's start with Jessica. The floor is yours.
Okay. We'll share my screen. All right, can everybody see this? Okay. All right, this first picture is a fun one. This was a visit from Senator Hickenlooper to look at our school bus, and that's Dominic May giving the presentation and Dan Harms. It was a good visit. This is going to our dashboard. Again, we still have some monitoring performance on the reliability section, and that is again because we had storms in the past that brings down the averages. Gary sent me a note this morning just mentioning that August was fairly good in terms of outages. The moisture continues to find faults in our underground cable. Not as near as many as in previous years. And he was mentioning that this is a testament to our cable replacement program that we've been pretty diligent on. We also had the downturn in new construction member jobs, which allowed us to increase our work on maintenance. So that is a good story. So that will hopefully get up to green checks at some point soon when kind of the averages even out. Everything else is green checks, and Carl will give his financial update after the dashboard. Any questions on this? Okay. Next slide. August highlights. Oops, sorry. Here is a picture of Dan Huntington at the fair. Of course, the kids love all the giveaways. So our next slide, good news, no accidents or incidents to report. Some of these just because of the delay by reporting the month previous. We already talked about that we hosted the CRA meeting. That was really successful. We already discussed the cyber risk assessment in executive session. So these are, some of these are repeats, but we also included some bigger construction projects like the Forest Lakes conversion and then the Pagosa Capital project. Rachel, did you have a question?
I was just curious, like in the Animas High School one, that seems like it's one of the bigger, newer builds that I know of. And I'm curious what beneficial electrification type projects they were really excited about and which ones they denied, and if the why, right? Because it's a little bit of a test case.
Right, that's a great question. Dan, worked really hard on this. Dan, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, Rachel, we were actually part of the building design phase, partly because I'm a parent of an Animas student and partly on the Plata Electric. And so they invited us to engage in those kind of conversations. We did look through heat pump options, just like we did also with Durango High School. And there's a lot of, this is the way we've always done it. This is what we're used to from the builders and the engineers that work on those projects. This is something new. We're not familiar with it. So that was an uphill battle for sure that we didn't quite win on the heating systems for them. We talked about other things as well, the heat pump water heaters, boilers, and all those kind of things, but largely went with business as usual, but on a very efficient and effective manner. They were definitely trying to get scores for various metrics that they were looking for, and so we did get some good wins on the efficiency aspects of it, though.
Yeah, good question, and an area of opportunity that we are going to examine pretty detailed, which is I think we get some positive feedback from the actual people that are going to live in the building or working on the building, but it's the contractors. So we know that we are going to have to really work with the contractors and create some more showcases. I think that's been clear, is we need to create some functional showcases where the contractors can go in and see these things at work. So we're going to be working on that in the future. Okay, keep moving unless I see a hand. All right, so everybody knows power supply exploration. We are still working on that. The big date will be this Friday. That is when the FERC ALJ will come out with their draft decision on the full CTP. So Matt is not giving an update today because there's not anything to update, but he will be sending a summary after the judge submits their draft decision Friday. So that will be Friday night or over the weekend. So keep an eye out for that email and he'll give the update. Bob, did you have a question on that? Oh, you're on mute, Bob. Sorry.
No, I was on that. There's a phrase in the power supply exploration. I just wanted to be able to ask that whenever appropriate.
Oh, go ahead.
So it says exploring its ability to use the new direct pay option. So what is that referring to?
Good question. So the Inflation Reduction Act put forward a provision in there that actually allowed cooperatives or other entities to use, and Carl and Dan help me out, it's the tax credits for those renewable projects. So like wind development or solar, typically only a independent power producer who actually has a tax liability would be able to use that provision. But this removes that barrier for us. And so We've been investigating this and working with NRECA and others to figure out what exactly does this mean. We're still looking into what that actually means because we need to talk to our auditors. And Carl, you're talking to our tax experts to figure out how could we use this? How does it change the pay with the contractor? Does it change anything? Do we get to take the tax break, but then their power rate goes up to us? So trying to figure out the best balance. Carl, Dan, did you want to add anything there?
Thank you.
No, I think you nailed it, Jessica, unless you disagree, Dan.
No, you got it. The only other thing I'd add to that is at this conference I'm at, I'm hearing some things about other options that you can stack a lot of these benefits and maybe get, this is aside from the direct pay, but there's other benefits that make sizable, if you can check all the boxes, low income, you've had, a coal plant shut down in the area, all these other things, they stack and compound to be something pretty sizable that I'm actually having a hard time believing because it's so gracious. So we need, it's something to look into. Like Jessica said, get those tax experts involved.
Yep. Joe, did you have a question on this slide?
Yeah, I guess I'm just confused about the tax consequences that we're a not-for-profit. So what, I'm just trying to figure out what these tax things, how they help us.
Well, this wouldn't be a tax credit for us. How it was applied before was for entities that had a tax. And so that it's you're in or you're out on getting this benefit if you have an appetite, if you have a tax appetite, which means you're an independent power producer, basically. This removes that barrier. So it doesn't have anything to do with really taxes. But that's what we're trying to figure out is what's the direct pay option component and how would we be able to use that? So we'll have to come back and get more details once we dig into it more.
So sorry, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Two points. One, maybe an explanation of who's getting directly paid would help. So is that government to a co-op? Is that the direct pay or what? So in a tax credit under the previous scheme, I think you could get cash back essentially as a tax credit if you had the appetite. And now the government's basically going to pay a non-taxable entity some value for their project. Is that correct?
That's correct, Tim.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So that's helpful. And then I think also maybe it was in Kohler's report, it mentioned that the CTP decision was going to be on the 29th, not you said Friday, that's this week, that would be the 23rd. So I'm just trying to clarify whether
I've been told it's the 23rd.
Okay. All right.
But it could,
it could slip.
FERC, it could be the 29th. Yeah.
I'm thinking it might slip at the FERC. That's
Shocker.
All right. Thank you.
But I think the point is we'll let you know as soon as we find out it's supposed to be out on the 23rd. Sue, did you have a question?
I do, but it's not relative to that. It was more about the LPEA Youth Robotics STEM. Yeah. Can you fill us in like where and when that's happening?
Yeah, I was going to get to that because that's the picture. So this is a great thing that Dan Harms and his family have done for a number of years. And one thing that our LPA employees were interested in is getting the LPA kids involved in a robotics team. So we have a robotics team with LPA staff, employees, children. And so that's extremely fun to see everybody's kids. And that started, a couple weeks ago. So our team is set and they are working. Well, Dan, you describe it. This is your baby.
Yeah, this is it's actually Legos is the building system that we're using here. So kids love Legos and they love robotics. So this has been going on for quite some time. It's actually a worldwide competition where in some date in August, everybody gets their kits and they say go. and you start working on a standardized tabletop like we're working on here. And it all culminates in starts off with regional competitions that are mid-November. And then you can go on to states, and then you can go on to nationals and internationals. With this being such a young and new team, we hope to represent ourselves well at the regionals.
Thank you.
And Dan, did you say that the theme was energy? I mean, I know it says super powered, but that's kind of the reason you thought it'd be fun to get LPEA kids involved, because it specifically relates to energy.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a different theme every year. It's from recycling to waste management to animals. This year happened to be energy, and so we couldn't pass that opportunity up.
Especially our real desire is to grow kids in our community that enjoy working for a power company to someday hire them. So,
Okay.
right, Grant, because there's your daughter right there.
Right there. Okay, onward.
All right. So again, I mentioned the Hickenlooper visit. This is a picture of a microgrid being built in Pagosa Springs. So for the Pagosa Springs board members, this is pretty exciting to see something in our backyard, somebody working with the Idaho laboratories on new technology. So that's great. And then the MDSC and OTIER were the top 3 in Colorado. So, we are pretty proud of this. Feel that staff really came together to focus on our financials in the last 3 years and focus in on what areas should we not be spending, where should we be spending, how we better do our jobs, how we put in a continuous improvement program together. And so we're pretty proud of our staff for taking that on, because it shows that their efforts on continuous improvement really improved our financials. So the graphs are in here, and I will scroll down. But before I do, Sue, did you have a question on this page?
I do, more about the homegrown microgrid. Have we been working with this group for a while? Is this something that just popped up on the radar screen? I guess I'd like to know a little bit about it and kind of how it's going to help the Pagosa area.
Dan, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, it was more the latter, Sue. It did just pop up on our radar. I don't know if any of you know Mick Abraham. He's a solar installer in Pagosa Springs. And he was selected to be a contractor for this project that was being done at Idaho Laboratories. And it was a very odd and coincidental and crazy sort of thing that just the way he was selected, he had expertise in a particular realm that they were looking for. And they selected him, and they just so happened to be building insulated containers, zircons in Pagosa Springs as well. And so it's just a perfect little fit. This is not being deployed in Pagosa, but it's interesting that was coming out of there. This was more for actually military use, to be deployed in the Middle East as a drop and go power supply.
Great, thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Dan. So I will go down to the graphs. Okay, so that's the MDSC graph. So as you can see, this is what we're talking about. Pretty proud of staff for being ranked kind of in the lower echelon of Colorado co-ops, even as low as around 17 to becoming 3rd. And then for OTIER, same thing, that's a more dramatic uptick. So kudos to our team for that. Joe, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious. It's first time I've seen a report on credit worthiness. Is this kind of a tip off that we're going to be going out to the credit market soon, or anything like that?
So these are always in our dashboard. So what we did is we just compiled it for the last 10 years. But Carl, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. We don't really have, a credit rating as an individual would. But these 2 metrics are what the main cooperative lenders would look at to assess our credit worthiness. And, this, as we go out, for construction projects and possibly for power supply, this is going to help us get the most advantageous deal from one of the key cooperative lenders.
Okay. And then on the previous page, who's the guy with the Michigan State shirt on?
That's me.
That's you? Oh, Carl. Okay. That's my alma mater, so.
Ah, good choice.
That was our, we try to do at least one team building outside a year, and this was in Pagosa this year. Garrett hosted, so we went on a walk. All right, Tim, did you have a question?
Just kind of a comment. I mean, I give kudos to the financial team and all of the cooperative team in MDSC and OTIER, KRTAs or creditworthiness. But I do want us to know that we never were uncreditworthy, right? We never fell below the level of demanded for the best rate. And while this does definitely help us in the financing of the BDP, whenever that occurs, there are also reasons sometimes to go into a less, into a lower rank in order to finance things that we need. It's an interplay of a number of factors, some of which we can make decisions to go to in order to make investment. And so I don't want to, I guess my concern is I don't want this to be some sort of driver for the decisions. This just should be a result of our decisions. So anyway, just a comment there.
Yep, good point. Okay, any other questions? And then I'll have Carl talk about the financial report. All right, Carl.
Thank you, Jessica. I will share my screen. No, that's not what I wanted. I'm sorry. That's the one. Okay. Everyone can see that okay? Are you seeing the full screen or like the half screen?
Yeah. Full
screen. Excellent. Got it right this time, Dan. I'm learning. Okay, so August financials. Lots of green check marks. Margins are well above where they need to be. Cash around 16%. Equity and debt all in the correct range, and quite topically MDSC 2.7, so exactly double what it needs to be for the covenant. I think to Tim's point, which is a valid point, but the closer we get to that covenant, the more nervous the lenders will get. And you're quite right. An electric distribution co-op, you are creditworthy by default. But if we had not met our covenant, we would have had to refinance at a higher rate. So I would say, that I've in my experience, and I've only worked for 2 co-ops, but yeah, I'm not used to the banks ringing me up every day asking me if I want money, which is quite a nice situation. So here are our highlights. I'll start with the orange or yellow or somewhere in the middle. These are we have operating costs that are slightly over forecast this month, driven really by our operations and engineering teams. Jessica touched on this at the beginning, but with some of the crews were more focused on maintenance than construction in August, and particularly in fire mitigation measures. So all of our overages were in that field. We were actually significantly under in the general and administrative and customer service type expenses, just because we have a substantial budget for legal fees every month and we spend virtually nothing. So that was a down. You'll see on the more detailed financial report where we do the bridge between this was our budget, this was our actual. the legal are down, and the construction and maintenance and fire mitigation were up. So that's how we ended up slightly over forecast in our operating costs. Our gross margin was pretty much exactly where it should be. So kudos to Dan's team. And despite that, we did have higher electric sales than we had forecast, but that overage was once again in the industrial space, which doesn't generate the gross margins that the commercial and residential classes do. So with a combination of, I'll also point out, yeah, labor costs, which should be August, I apologize, are pretty much exactly where we forecast them to be for August. But a combination of that, slight overage on operating costs, and there was a few dollars in depreciation and interest, which was slightly above what we had forecast. We ended up $52,000 below forecast for August, but as of the year to date, we're still in very, very good shape. I think I projected in May and June that we would see us coming much tighter to forecast as the year went on, and July and August have demonstrated that, and September is shaping up to be the same. So any questions? Thank you. Joe.
Yeah, Carl, on page 47 of 78, cost of power. So cost of power, it looks like it's up $2 million for the year. Am I reading that correctly?
That is correct. That's, yeah.
And I mean, I'm assuming that's not gonna decline. Is that any kind of concern, or how do you view that?
So the cost of power is going up purely because we've got more volume of sales. So if it was cost based on, Tri-State charging us more, which they can't do in the middle of a year without notifying us, this is purely a volume issue. So we have the sales to offset.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Joe?
Yes, great, thank you.
Thank you. Holly.
Thanks, Carl. I just wanted to say kudos to you and the staff for leading that Colorado Cooperative Accountants Group and sharing, experience and stuff like that, because it's really important. It strengthens everybody. And so thank you for that. And I just want to reiterate, because the MDSC and the O tier is not only creditworthiness, but it's our ability to meet our future financial obligations. And so just seeing how that has gone up is a true testament to the work of our staff. And, Jessica, that was one of your stated goals when you started in 2019 was, how do we address the silos built around each department? And so to me, that is just a true indicator of the success of that. And so I really, truly appreciate your work and the work of staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cola.
Yeah, so on page 49 of 78, the statement of operations, below the operating margins, the non-operating margins on interest, I saw that went way up for the month. Could you maybe address that for me, or why that had such a big jump? And the second thing is on page 51, excuse me, the forecast revision. And again, down there, the income from equity investments is quite different, and so is the non-operating margins. So would you mind touching on those items for me, please?
Sure. I'm just going to bring up that report and remind myself. So we are looking at non-operating margins interest. Yeah, we were able, essentially, this is a kind of the slight counterbalance to the cost of borrowing going up so high. We have some money in commercial paper out there with CFC, which used to pay, you know, a penny per $1 million. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but not much. And they've actually started giving us something resembling income from it. It's still low, but it's more than it used to be.
So was that tied into the interest rate? Like today, I know the rate is looking to maybe get boosted up, so that might increase as we continue
Indeed.
down in the near future. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
they will, their like rate that they have on their website right now is around 5 for variable credit lines. But if you have commercial paper with them, they're paying around 1.5%, where it was about 0.6% before.
Okay, good.
So the other one you were looking at, was it income loss from equity investments?
Yes, on the forecast revision page 51.
Forecast revision. Oh, compared to where we were originally, that is
Yeah.
that is our income from our investment in FASTTRACK. So we are taking a very conservative view on that, but I think that could well be higher when we actually get to the year end. We don't have the visibility to make a great call on that at this stage in the year.
Okay. And how's about the non-operating margins right below that? It looked like it jumped up quite a bit. Is that also tied to the interest rates?
No, those are generally 99% of that money will be when we dispose of an asset and we get more than we had it valued for. And with the market for used vehicles, we're selling them at more than we expected when they reach their end of their useful lives for us.
Oh, okay. Good to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Cola. Joe.
And this isn't really financial, but the note about the increased fire mitigation spending, I really think, I'm guessing we're at the end of the year for that kind of work. And I think it'd be great to put out a news release and talking about, you know, how many miles we did and what we found and what's going on out there, just to reassure people and let people know we're continue to do that work. So thanks.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, I think I'm done. Thank you, guys. Over to you, Jessica.
Over to you, John. That concludes our discussion. If we want to move on to the tri-state.
I am on it. So smooth sailing. Thank you, guys. Yeah, so for the earlier conversation, let's bring Kirsten's discussion up. You ready to go here?
Yeah, I sure am. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, so I'm looking at page 76 in your packet. And what
I'm sorry, hang on a second. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but Tim, you had your hand up. Did you want to say something before we got going?
Yeah, I had a question on the finances, so, but if we're moving on, I could probably wait. I just noted.
No, let's get it closed out. I'm sorry, Kirsten, do you mind closing it out, please? Thank you. Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, John. So in looking at this, it seems we did draw on our line of credit. Is that correct, Carl?
Yeah, temporarily, it's actually being paid back this week.
So it's not a long-term, it's
no,
because it's under in the balance sheet, it shows long-term debt increase of 5.
Technically, by accounting standards, we should put it there because we could pay it back in longer than a year, but because we're not, it's kind of misleading.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks, John.
Yep, go ahead. I appreciate that. Sorry, Kirsten, please go ahead.
Yeah, so for the past few months, I've been sending you a lot of stuff, and I really wanted to distill it down to really what the major question is that we're trying to deal with at the Rate Design Committee. So FERC is going to tell us whether or not we need to direct assign radial transmission. So that's not something we need to decide. What, as a Rate Design Committee, and this is where I need direction from you guys, is what we can do is determine the amount of tilt. And by that, I mean, we, just like we have different members in our system, there's different members in the tri-state system, and they have, some of them are further away, so they have higher transmission costs. Some of them are, use all of their energy during the summer, but very little during the winter. So they're summer peakers. Some are like us, we use more energy during the winter, although we're coming down off of that a little bit, and are not the winter peakers that we used to be. So depending upon if you use all of your electricity at one time of the year, if you, and your load factor is low, what that means is you're paying for transmission all of the year, but you're only paying for the energy part of the year. So the load factor is, if it's really low, then it can be very expensive for you if you're being charged for capacity. We at LPEA are pretty fortunate. We're in the 80s in our load factor. And what that means for us is we're pretty close to capacity. You know, we pay for this much transmission, we pay for this much of the plant, of the tri-state plant, and we use about 80% of that. So we're in fairly good shape. The A40 rate, that's our current rate, has tilt built into it. And what a lot of folks, especially us, folks like us who have the higher load rate, want to do is get some less tilt in there. If you look on page 76, I've got 3 pie charts there. So with the top left one is basically the A40 rate as it exists right now. The bottom middle one is the FERC rate, being if we did exactly what FERC has always said, which was no tilt, then it would look more like this. The difference between those two is about $5.50 per kilowatt in the demand charge. Now, we're anticipating if we were to carry the A40 rate into the next rate schedule, demand charges are going to be about $20 a kilowatt. So if we make it, if that $5.50 kilowatt hour in tilt is in there, that's a lot of tilt. That's 25, we'll call it 25% tilt. Right? And I don't think that's good. I don't think that's right. A40 isn't right. But I'm not sure whether I should say, hey, no tilt at all. My board says no tilt, because this isn't, I'm not a tri-state board member here. I'm an LPEA board member. So we don't have to worry about double hatting and everything. So I need to take guidance from you guys, and I'd be happy to give you my opinion, but how much tilt is good? Do we want about half of what we have right now? Would that make us happy? I did send, and I'm sorry, I sent it late, an email last night that shows sort of where the tilt is and how it affects different folks. And I talk about what we really want to do is if we can lessen the slope of the line and make it so it's not as bad, not a big of a cost shock. So it could be like a 6% or more cost shock for those low factor folks. And it could be up to a 3% or more benefit for us high factor folks. So can we make that a little more even so it's not such a big shock for us, and I mean for others, and we don't get maybe quite as much a benefit? As a cooperative, I'm fine with some degree of kind of evening that out, because it's not a perfect world. But I wanted to get some feedback from you guys. We actually will be talking more about this at the RDC in October, where we'll get what these rates would most probably look like, and what that delta will be between the folks and how much of that shock it would be. And then in November, we'll be really having to make some decisions and vote on it. So I want to get some discussion from you guys now as far as what are you comfortable with? Does this make sense to, yeah, I guess a little bit of tilt is okay, or no, we want no tilt. We want to have everything cost assigned. We're in good shape. Just forget everybody else. Thoughts?
I have my hand up.
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, to be honest, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I have no way to weigh in on that. I have no context here. If this is leading up to a vote, okay, if there's a recommendation, but maybe the best way to sort of try to jumpstart the conversation is to ask staff. Dan, or have you covered this? Do you have a sense of what the staff's position is on this issue? Maybe you could summarize.
Yeah, thanks, John. You know, and when we talk about load factor and cost of power, you'll see some months when there's a spike in the load or something along those lines. So when you're saying it's hard to understand how it impacts us, one way to look at it is what they're talking about when they talk about tilt is that demand charge to energy charge ratio. And right now that we've been doing it in a certain way that's built into the rate, what FERC recommends is more of an allocation to demand based on cost structure and the way that the costs fall out, and less so on energy. Now, that's a good thing for La Plata Electric, one, because we're already such a high load factor that reduces our costs. So right now we're subsidizing other load factor utilities. And the other reason why that's good is because honestly, we're very good at controlling our load, it creates more opportunities for us as we go and manage DERs into the future, to have really things as cost-based as they can be, which leans towards that FERC model. And that then the third thing to consider is as we head into a world of a BDP, a partial buyout, and you look at how what we have the ability to do, what we're going to be left paying Tri-State in the future for the half that we are buying from them. Something with what FERC would be proposing sits better with us as well. It gives us less cost exposure on that, since we can avoid generation demand on that aspect as well. So I would say, in looking at this and following these things, I would strongly recommend that we support the FERC model, but we can be accommodating for something slightly less than that. I would say, there's where we are today, there's the FERC, and there's halfway in the middle. If I would consider anything between, halfway and up a win, but in order to get that win, you sort of have to say, hey, let's, we need the FERC model, and then let those that don't want the FERC model, work it down if need be. But we need to, I think, be very supportive of that kind of approach.
Okay, so just to sort of net that out from a board perspective, is this leading to a vote, a recommendation, a straw poll? Where are we going with this?
I was assuming something like a straw poll or a recommendation. I don't think it requires a vote unless it's really close and we need to vote and say, no, let's go with whatever the majority says. But if I get a sense from the board that says, whatever, no, FERC only, stick with FERC only, or great, do as much tilt as you can, then I'll go with that. If I get kind of this in between, then I'm fine with that. I think the reality is we're going to end up at that in between. We're going to have less tilt than we have today, but we're not going to have a tiltless rate. That's the reality of it. So trying to think about political capital and everything. How much do I spend fighting it? Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so let me my last thought on this, and then I'll go back to being my last thought as a voting member of this group is I'd love to see a recommendation from the staff in conjunction with where you're headed with this. And I definitely need more time to do background reading, including guidance from Dan or whoever the right person on the team is. I'm just not in a place where I could provide even a high level overview of where I'd be headed as again, speaking as an individual. So.
That's very helpful feedback. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up this month, because next month we're going to see some actual numbers and you need to start absorbing what that means. And there's been a lot of stuff, thrown at you over the past several months. So I'm just trying to focus on this one thing, and I hope this will be helpful. So what other questions are there so that we can get back to you in either now or in October, so that so we can feel like we have a little thing to stand on?
Was that directed to me or an open question?
Everybody, that's an open question, John.
Okay, I'm
Thanks.
done with my comments, so
Okay.
why don't you navigate the rest of the hands up?
Okay,
please.
I can't, if there are hands, I can't see
Tim,
them.
go ahead. I'll do
Thank
it
you.
for you, Kirsten.
Thank you.
Tim, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize we were playing pinball up there, but it's kind of tilt anyway.
Oh,
So
okay. Thank you for explaining.
yeah, I'm getting a lot of tilt feedback here. So, you know, I guess I have a feel for the concept of what you're providing, and the late graph that you sent that I received this morning was helpful. I mean, fundamentally, certain co-ops are subsidizing others as a result of this tilt.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and we've debated that and tried to allocate costs at LPEA more fairly and more equitably. You're right. There's always some level of one group sort of probably paying more than their actual costs, which is what a good rate design would do. You would allocate your rate so that your costs for a particular class or whatever are covered, right? And this is sort of saying, okay, some of those classes are getting a favorability and some are not, right? And we're in the class that we end up paying, right? More than what our probably fair share costs are. That's my understanding of how this looks, right? And so the question that you're asking is how much of that sort of subsidy are we willing to bear in that process of being a good co-op member and so forth, right? Good questions. My view is that Tri-State has in a lot of negotiations in the last few years pointed to, we don't want to allow some co-op leave and all the rest of us are left with those costs, while at the same time providing a rate in which they do exactly that, right? So from my perspective, I think Tri-State should walk the talk a little bit more, and that we should remove some of that tilt. And then we're managing our costs and our load and paying a fair rate accordingly, right? So that's one data point. The other question I really have is, you know, like, what's the likelihood of this actually even being a Tri-State decision, right? We're at FERC. They got what they wanted, right? We're at FERC. You know, even if the board has a real role now, the Tri-State board, in making that decision, we're outnumbered, you know, 41 or 40-2 or something, right? I mean, there's a whole lot of little co-ops that gain some level of advantage here that probably could outvote us, right? So, and then you get to the point of who really makes a decision. It's probably going to be FERC, right? And they've already kind of given an indication of where they want to go. So I guess my question is, a lot of work, we can consider it, but my question is, do we have any real influence here? Doesn't seem like it to me.
Yeah.
Either through the Tri-State board, or if the Tri-State board makes a decision through FERC. So I think I understand a bit of what the issue is you're talking about, and I wonder whether there's really real influence on our part anyway. So
So FERC protects us from the tyranny of the majority, and so at FERC, this will probably get kicked into settlement if there's any protest, and United has basically said they'll protest pretty much anything that goes forward. So we know it's going to go into settlement. What we'd like to do to go into settlement is have a fairly strong and clean understanding and be able to say, okay, this is the reasons why, the cooperative principles, or because we're encouraging renewables, or because of our PPAs, whatever the reasons are that we're saying we need some tilt now, rate shock being another one. And then being able to get to a settlement easier than if it was just, okay, guys, you guys figure it out for us, because one way or the other, it's in settlement that it's going to happen. That's where all of our efforts have ended up at FERC. And by us, I mean, all our LPEA efforts have ended up at FERC is in settlement. So there have been multiple G&Ts who have, the biggest one has 28 members. And they do have tilt in their rates, and they were uncontested. So FERC just said, okay, cool, you guys agree on it, we're good to go. It's when people don't necessarily agree. And it is possible that if there's minor agreement or just disagreement from one or two co-ops, and that they are leaving within a year of when the rate goes into effect, then they may not have as much standing. So I think there is a benefit to it. I also don't want to, I also want to include you guys in the decision making of it. That, you know, I have an opinion on this, but I don't want to just go up there and just represent my opinion. I'd want to be able to say, well, my board has these questions, or my board thinks these things. And so are we the tail that wags the dog? No, but we definitely are part of the dog still.
Well, I mean, did you get my input? You feel like
I have that. You want to remove some tilt, tri-state needs to walk the talk. And what's the likelihood of this being a tri-state decision? And it's very likely that if tri-state goes in with a one that 95% of the members are happy with, that the settlement that comes out of that is going to look very similar to the rate that went in. That I don't think, unless
I'm just addressing your desire for some input. I think you got it, and
okay,
that's all I have. I don't want to take more time. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim.
Okay, I got your input. Thank you, sir.
Sean Lee, you're up.
All right, in reference, I appreciate Dan weighing in on the FERC method perhaps being the most preferred for us. And my question was going to be, or if the staff is going to generate something between now and next month. And I think he said it would be primarily on the BDP for us, since that's where we're going for the future of this. And I wasn't sure if these pie charts referenced where we currently are, but I think we should take a look at that path where we're going. And if that FERC method, it sounded like from Dan said, is still standing, then when we get that staff recommendation, that seems very valid to me. Thanks for the information.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Ted, you're up.
Yeah. So my first comment is, you know, I think, Kirsten, you should advocate strongly for LPEA. I think there's no shame in that. And I also understand that probably no matter how hard we advocate, sort of back to Dan's comment, if we advocate for 100% FERC methodology, it would likely back off some from that, and we will be in the middle range, which is probably the fair answer. But for us to not advocate, you know, very strongly for what is the right thing for LPEA, I think it sets a bad precedent. You know, I don't even like to use the term subsidize or subsidy, but sort of consciously electing to use subsidization, in my opinion, removes motivation. And from what I'm hearing from Dan, in very basic terms, a lot of the reason why this works for LPEA is because staff manages our grid, our energy use very well. And let's not provide lack of motivation for other co-ops to do the same. If we need to be helpful, let's do that in sharing information and not sharing our members' money. So that's my comment on how we should advocate. There's a flip side to that, and it's towards Tim's question of is this an LPEA or a tri-state decision, or is it a FERC decision? I would just say let's try and be really cognizant about what's going to happen there, because to advocate for La Plata Electric you're going to burn political capital. And if we know how this is going to turn out and we don't have to burn that political capital, then that's probably the better decision, is just to smile and nod. We know how it's going to turn out, and we can lose less friends in the process. So that's kind of my, I guess, from the political angle, what I would ask from you, Kirsten. That's all I have.
Okay. You know, one that what comes to mind with that, Ted, is that when we get to the settlement portion of this, which I think we will be there, that's when the friends are needed too. So to help, help support the, no, let's not have this much tilt. And one other point, Ted, some of these co-ops have 4 staff people total. So it's not necessarily, oh, we don't want to do that. It's, I can't do that. So we are very different beasts from each other. You know, the old, if you've seen one co-op, you've seen one co-op thing. Okay. Holly, you must be up because your picture just went to the front of the queue.
There you go.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. First of all, I'm kind of in the same boat as John Mitchell, is I don't feel really adequate, like in knowledge of this. But I think listening to all my fellow board members, y'all have great points. Ted, I think you nailed it on a whole bunch of what my thoughts were. We have to advocate for LPEA first and foremost. That's our duty of loyalty and care. But in your email, Kirsten, about tilt, one of the very last lines is about a rate shock for low load members that tend to be smaller irrigation summer peaking members. And I would just like to point out that this is the same group that has a whole lot of apprehension about, our movements as far as CTP and BDP, and they're really unsettled. And I know that it's not really on us to care about that, but to some degree it kind of is as well, because of, like you were talking about, the political capital and such like that. So I just want to point out that this is, I want to thank you, is what I really want to do, for your hard work up there, because I know that it's, it is a lot. So thank you, Kirsten.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Holly.
Great. Okay.
Well, thank you for the feedback. Perfect.
Excellent.
And I think I have some marching orders, and some of that is more information, and some of it is, well, it's all about more information to you guys. And I'm trying to minimize it, because I know I throw a lot of crap at you guys. So I'm trying to minimize it and focus it. And maybe I over-focused it and over-minimized it. So we'll get something out. And of course, we've tasked staff with a recommendation along these lines too.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, let's push on. We have board action agenda. So Finance and Audit Committee update. Sue, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. We did meet on the 13th, last Thursday, because September had more Thursdays in it, then we were able to actually meet a week later. But Carl pretty much covered everything that we talked about in the FAC. The October FAC meeting will be on the 13th, and they will be presenting the draft budget to the FAC committee. And then on the 17th will be the committee of the whole to discuss that budget and questions that will arise from there. So if you have an opportunity to attend that next FAC meeting in October, I would highly recommend that. The only other thing that we did talk about in the FAC on Thursday was interest rate increases are impacting our potential buy down for the future. But it's still so up in the air with the decision not coming from FERC yet, that it was just hypothetical at this point. But we do appreciate Carl going through the process with us, and we will keep everybody apprised as we move forward with that. But otherwise, we'll be looking for the budget in our October meeting, and I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has them.
Excellent. Thank you, Sue. Questions? Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you could explain, I don't regularly attend the FAC meetings. what will we learn at that October 13th meeting compared to, you know, just waiting till the 17th? And what would you like us to look at, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question, Joe. And really, it just gives the directors a few more days to look at the information that will be presented. You know, it always seems like when we get close to this budget timeframe that it's kind of seems like it's hurried or we don't have enough time to look at things. So October will be the FAC meeting, will be the first presentation of that budget. And then the committee of the whole will be that following Monday. So it just gives everybody a few more days to look at that information and raise any questions that they might have about it.
And then we pass the budget in November or in October?
I believe November is my understanding. Is that correct, Carl?
Yes. That will give us an opportunity if in reviewing there are changes that the board wishes to make before we make a final approval.
Tim, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, kind of following up on Joe's question, you know, so far we have not seen a capital budget yet. I think that's probably going to be presented at the October FAC. Is that correct, Carl?
It will be presented and reviewed, but we will send it out I think a week or two before the FAC for you guys to give you more time to review, because obviously there's a lot of information.
Right. So that will be the first time the FAC has a chance to look at the capital items budget versus the operating budget that we've somewhat looked at. And so that might be a reason to want to attend the FAC if you're not a member or not someone who typically comes to those. And that would give you, like Sue said, some time to digest that. That's a big package, a lot of money. And then be able to be more prepared in the COW with both operations and capital budget. So, thanks.
Hey, any other questions? I'm not seeing any other hands. All right, back to you, John. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sue. All right, Committee on Policies. COPO. COP. All right. Ops.
Yeah, thanks, John. Every time I, start to think that the policy work is dry and boring, we have a meeting like we did on Monday this week, and it can't be dry and boring if we have attendance like we had in this meeting. So, we had all the members, all the board members that are Committee on Policy members, all the staff members that are Committee on Policy members. Plus we were honored with the presence of Dan and Carl as well. And we even had 2 board members who aren't Committee on Policy members joining us in the meeting. So it must be pretty fun if everyone's participating. What we did, so it's been a long time since Committee on Policy has attacked anything, and it's about time to get back into it. There was a big forcing function to get this going again, and that was the meat of our meeting. So we, and I say we, and obviously, just massive credit to Graham for all of his work in drafting these things for our review and revision. But we created a brand new policy 111, which is our policy on holding virtual meetings. And so it deals with virtual meetings themselves and also with board member attendance by virtual meeting. So we reviewed that, and Committee on Policies, had some comments and some minor changes to the initial draft from Graham. But by the end of the meeting, we did come out with an initial recommendation. So the full board will be seeing that. My guess is by early next week. So that was the big lift. And I know everyone's sort of been waiting on that. We've had over the past 2 or 3 months, quite a few board meeting conversations about the need for that. It is mandated by the members' vote from 1 year and 3 months ago when we allowed virtual meetings, that the board would come up with a policy that more clearly directed how we would hold those. So you're going to see that soon. The other things we lifted were policy 303 on renewable generation funds and 304 regarding on-bill financing. What we did with those were some very minor clarifications. And so those were easy Committee on Policy recommendations. Board will see those. And then we tried to lift policy 313 and partially related to the electric service agreement to help with some clarification where that policy and that electric service agreement had some conflict or some potential conflict. Bottom line, we got in pretty deep on that. And, I think the clarification between those two documents wasn't too difficult, but the, not only is Committee on Policy responsible for, clarifying these things and keeping them in line with current standards, we're supposed to review them regularly. And review means look at everything and decide if it's still right, if it still works. And so there was some really good detailed conversation about that. And in the end, we decided that we weren't prepared. We weren't ready to make a recommendation to the full board. So we'll continue to work on 313 and electric service agreement. For your information, it's basically about determining who's responsible for damage in certain situations, whether that falls completely on LPEA or whether member owners have responsibility in certain cases. So we're going to keep working on that. So going forward, you will see, as we have done in the past, some editable recommendations from Committee on Policy. We're going to try and fast track this a little bit. So our hope is that we can come back with this new policy 111 and the presumably minor changes on 303 and 304 for an actual vote in October. So that's going to involve giving everyone about 2 weeks to review and have comments back to us, giving Committee on Policies enough time to meet again and incorporate those before we present them for board approval in October. So when you see it, try and take the time to get through it. I guess one more comment on sort of 303 and 304, even though our recommended modifications are just almost trivial, they're clarifications, that doesn't, and that means that the Committee on Policies reviewed all of the language and didn't recommend any changes to the language in those. But that doesn't mean that the full board can't read those and say, wait, we should change something that's not part of the recommendation from Committee on Policy. So don't necessarily focus only on the red lines. Read the whole thing. They're both only a page, so it's not a big deal. And make comments if they are outside of the red lines. That is the report, and that's what you can expect coming up in the next month. Tim's hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, this isn't necessarily directed to the Committee on Policies. It's kind of a question of, in the past, the committees have provided a written report that goes into our board packet, and it doesn't seem like that's happening anymore. I'm just curious if that's some change I'm unaware of, but I mean, that's a lot of info to take notes on in a verbal thing from both these committees. And I think the idea of having a report that came into our packet from those committees was so that we have a way to keep track of some of this. And maybe it's just timing this month or something, but I'm just wondering am I the only board member that cares about that, or do we all have a wish to see a written report from the committees?
Well, since I'm in the middle of the report, I'll comment on it first, but then Sue has her hand up. I'm sure she wants to comment maybe from FAC, or maybe it's, I'm sorry, Sue, not to put words in your mouth. I'll let you go. I totally agree with you, Tim. And my quote unquote excuse for not providing that is that you will see, pretty significant email documentation on what we did and what we're asking within a few days of the meeting. If that weren't the case, then I certainly would have prepared a summary report. And that's just an excuse. There's nothing that would have prevented me, between Monday and now of presenting a pretty small summary, and it actually would have been a lot more concise than what I gave to you verbally. I get that. Go ahead, Sue.
Well, and I'm the same way. My apologies for not getting a written report out this month. I will certainly do so. It kind of slipped through the cracks where we didn't have a July FIC meeting. So, and then not a lot happened in August, but certainly I will start putting that back in the report. I agree, Tim. I think we should do that.
Thanks for bringing it up, Tim.
Yeah, thank you.
Nothing else from me, John.
Terrific. Okay. Okay, so that's it for section 5. It is we're a couple minutes ahead of schedule. Why don't we plow forward and finish out item C, the board meeting schedule, and then we'll take a break if that works for everybody. Okay. All right. So who is driving the meeting schedule?
That's me. So it's hard to believe, but it is time to set our board meeting schedule for 2023. And as you guys will recall, that is very closely linked to the board election schedule for 2023. So you'll see there are 2 documents there, one that's a resolution on our meeting dates for 2023, and another which is the related board election schedule. Just a couple things to note in this. We stuck with our standard kind of 3rd Wednesday of the month, except for in April, June, and December, because there are some key public power meetings during those times, and also the December holidays that we wanted to avoid. We did double check that these dates don't conflict with school breaks, either in Pagosa or in La Plata, so hopefully that works. The other piece of information specifically on the elections that I wanted to share with you came from Tiffany, the La Plata County Clerk. There is a special election being held in May next year. And while we usually do our elections in May, she did not think it was a good idea to have our ballots go out around the same time as the other ballots. So she suggested that we bump our elections to June, which would also mean that we would bump our annual meeting to June. So with that, I will open the floor to questions or comments on the proposal.
Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate the clerk's note there. Are we legal doing that? Okay.
As far as moving the annual meeting and the election back to June.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it extends someone's term by a month, correct?
It does, but sort of under typical Colorado nonprofit corporation law, the current directors sit until their replacement is elected. There's no, I mean, we are sort of obligated to hold a meeting within a year, but we don't have a designated time in our bylaws. It's just as set by determination of the board of directors. So, okay. you know, it's, I mean, I agree with you that you wouldn't want to start abusing this privilege and sort of like setting elections every 18 months or something like that, right? But I mean, 1 month here or there is well within our bylaw authority.
Okay, thank you. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple quick questions. One about the election calendar. Is this just for next year, or is this any recommendation to continue a schedule like this going further than next year?
This is just for this year.
Okay. For next year, I guess.
Or for next year, sorry. Yep.
2023. You're way ahead of us, I guess. The other around the board of director meeting dates, I was curious about why it's sort of 2 virtual, 1 in person. Do we, and I guess Ted was saying that they just came up with a policy on this. I don't know if those are synced at all. And I mean,
I mean, they are, Tim, if you don't mind me sort of jumping in, that they are synced. And so you'll be able to look at the draft policy 111. But the idea is that this resolution where we set sort of the baseline meeting schedule is required by our bylaws. And then what policy 111 does in sort of it has sort of two components to it. One is sort of the authority to switch certain meetings from virtual to in-person as sort of, or from in-person to virtual as sort of situations warrant, and to hold entirely virtual meetings as necessary, basically amending this resolution. And then another half is director attendance virtually at an in-person meeting. Both of those were covered by the bylaw change. So this is designed to kind of work pretty closely with where 111 is going, which is recognizing the fact that we have an obligation as a board to pass a resolution that sets this schedule for the entire year, but then we've needed to build in some flexibility to amend that schedule as reasonable and necessary.
okay, so so I guess my question really is, are we, I mean, we're voting on, these are the dates, right? These are the dates that we will have our board meeting. And then it seems like we're also voting on how we attend that meeting. And so that's a question. Are we voting on how we attend that meeting as well in this case, whether we're going to have an in-person or virtual with this resolution? Because it's hard for me to vote on that without having seen the policy that sets that. So my view would be we should vote on this as dates, and we can discuss and decide how we attend those meetings or how attendance is provided later, because I think there's still some question around that. Does that make sense? Did what I say make sense to folks?
And it does to me. I mean, I would say this, just as this resolution specifically, the resolution sets, and this is under Article 4, Section 1 of the bylaws, the annual resolution sets the time and place of the meetings, and sort of the general concept of policy 111 is that virtual is a place. And so I think that's why this resolution is drafted this way.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that we are in fact going to need to vote on not just the calendar, but how we attend it, where that place is, right? Is that correct?
That's correct. And then
Okay.
just to summarize, the policy that we're going to pass gives us additional flexibility to change the location if needed. So this is kind of setting the framework. We will also have flexibility to change the place in the future.
All right. Okay, that's very helpful. So we would have opportunity to change the venue, if you will.
Correct.
And so I guess brings up a couple of questions or points. One, I'm not sure we need to have two virtual to every one, right? In-person meeting, right? So, and I know that so I would like to hear more discussion on that from other members of the board, right? The other is, are any of these in-person meetings anticipated to take place like in Pagosa?
So I'll cover the Pagosa. We are not putting any of those in Pagosa right now because there's no good place to have it.
Okay.
We haven't had success in the past. We're constantly looking, but we're working with Garrett. We don't have a good ability to have it where our members can call in. There's just not good broadband, not good availability. So as of right now, we're not suggesting that. If we find a good solution, then definitely we would add that as a recommendation for a board meeting.
Okay, so they all in person would be at our boardroom at,
Yep.
or whatever you call that room now.
That's correct. Multi-purpose.
Our multi-purpose room. Okay. All right. So I'll stop my questions there. I'd like to get a sense from the board about the virtual versus in-person schedule. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. And just as a quick reminder, sorry, go.
Oh.
I'm sorry, Rachel, please go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I saw where this was going as soon as I saw these things presented together. So what I would like to propose is we pull them apart because the first one seems time sensitive. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the 2023 LPA Director Election Timeline Proposal.
I'm sorry, did you say you want to pull them, the timeline without the location? Is that what you intended to say?
I am pulling apart the Director Election timeline from the whole other resolution because I don't think they're the same thing. So I just want to get the election piece, that calendar, because it seems like we have a 6-month announcement thing and with Tiffany and the whole clerk's office, like they need to get that started or set. I don't know. And then I figure this whole other part about board meetings, when, where, etc., we can tackle as a separate thing.
I'll second your motion.
Second that.
Okay, well, so now we're going into the sort of standard tunnel there. So every other comment is going to go on hold for a second. Let's get through this motion and then we'll resume, come back out to the Russian doll on the outer one. So with the second motion, this is discussion restricted to the motion at hand. Okay. All in favor of the motion, hold your hand up and say aye.
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 All opposed? All abstained? Okay, thank you, Rachel. That motion passes. She's getting it done with the little Rob's Rules of Order. Love it. Something I never thought was going to be that important in my life. Apparently it is. Okay, so now coming back out to the outer Russian doll, we're resuming the conversation around and correct me if I'm saying this wrong. We're resuming the conversation around the board of directors proposed meeting schedule by itself. And we can continue to have an organic conversation, but if somebody was inclined to make a motion, we can also sort of go down that road. But Kirsten, you are next on deck, so you're up.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. You asked what we thought about the 1 and 3. You know, John had floated it last month about once a quarter in person, and I'm pretty good with once a quarter in person. I would like it to be more like every other one, but I could be convinced either way. So that's my input on that piece of it.
Perfect, thank you. Kohler, go ahead.
Yeah, once the motion is made, I will make an amendment to do every other one because I'm in favor of doing more in person than what this shows. I also am thinking that it should go both ways as far as deciding to take virtual to personal or personal to virtual. So those are the amendments I would make on the motion. Thank you.
And Kohler, if I could just sort of address that, when we have policy 111, we should have some idea in there about the difference between virtual or in-person to virtual versus the other way around. There's more logistics around converting what was previously a virtual meeting into in-person than there is. We can sort of set up I think it's, most people here know better than I do with the March 2020 virtual board meeting. We can set up a virtual board meeting pretty quickly as a staff, but there is some more complex logistics in going the other direction and taking a virtual meeting and converting it to in person. And so policy 111 is going to try to address that imbalance. So yes, there will be a possibility to convert in person to
Virtual to in person.
sorry, yes.
Yeah,
correct.
and then Kohler, just to
virtual in person,
clarify,
but they'll be slightly different.
and I think Graham's point is that we're going to address that. We prefer it not be addressed today. That is part of the policy committee, and that's what they're working on. And then that proposal will go out to the board to review that component of it.
But it is in the resolution, and the one thing I worry about, I know there's more complexity and it's a little tougher, but I don't want to get locked into where we can't even consider it. And more the complexity and stuff would be on the individual meeting than overall, but this actually locks us to where we can't even consider it. So that's my thoughts on it.
Okay. Thank you for that. Ted, go ahead.
So this is not a minor point. It's important. The way this resolution is written, a change in the venue would be at the discretion of the CEO in consultation with the president of the board. Policy discussions we've had in the past and the draft of policy 111 dictate it the other way around, that the discretion to change a meeting from in-person to virtual is the discretion of the president in consultation with CEO and potentially legal counsel. So I definitely don't want to pass this resolution knowing that it is different than what we're going to present in 111. So I'd like to get feedback on that and then potentially change the resolution to reflect that.
Could I address that for you, Ted? And I just there's a logic behind that, right? Which is that in a parliamentary basis, right? It really falls perpetually to the president of the board of directors to do this, and so part of this resolution allows that authority to get delegated specifically. But as far as the policy, which will continue year over year, as opposed to a one-year delegation of authority, that's why I understand that they're inconsistent. That inconsistency was intentional on my part because of this sort of parliamentary issue of ongoing delegations versus permanent versus temporary delegations. That said, I don't feel like we really have to. This is a super important principle for sort of the compact nature of this board. If in the policy the board feels that having this being an ongoing delegation to the CEO because of the CEO's position to make that decision, right, about the facilities and about the ability to host and organizing the logistics, et cetera, I think it's perfectly reasonable to make it an ongoing delegation per policy. The board delegates a lot of things to the CEO perpetually. That's pretty much the entirety of policy 103. So, but my initial draft of both of these was based on that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And that was my only concern, is that we would create a problem that was sort of not legal. So I withdraw that concern. And my last additional comment there would be, I am supportive of the quarterly in-persons. I think there is, I don't want to overlook the value of the virtual meeting. And so I'm going to lean towards the quarterly schedule. Thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you, Tim. Go ahead.
So I'll make a motion to approve this. What is it? Resolution 2022-09 with one change. I'm going to use Kirsten's wording, whereby it says the board hereby delegates to the LPEA CEO in consultation with the president of the board of directors the authority to convert any meeting to virtual or in person as circumstances warrant.
Okay, we have a second for that.
Second.
Okay, Ted. Okay, Rachel, you're going back on the shelf. We are now having a conversation about the motion at hand. Okay, Rachel, do you want to speak on the motion at hand?
I think so. It was just,
ahead.
well, I guess it's a question that helps influence my thoughts on the motion at hand. Is there a time pressure on this particular resolution and a reason we're getting it before that policy 111 is buttoned up?
Rachel, it was more because it was connected to the election timeline. They go hand in hand. We just wanted everybody to see the timing of it all. And honestly, the motion that Tim has given, that syncs up with the policy now.
Kohler, go ahead.
So I'd like to make an amendment to the amendment, or excuse me, I want to make an amendment, and I want to change the dates as far as virtual and in person to every other month. And we would start January virtual so that the June meeting would be in person. So that's my amendment, to change it to every other month being personal or in person and virtual.
Okay, so into the Russian dolls we go. Does anybody have a second? I see a hand up. Kirsten has the hand up for the second. Okay, so for discussion. Tim, go ahead.
I'll just ask a question of, I know we discussed this at length before. What is the reasoning for the current suggested schedule, or the schedule in this? Is there a method behind this madness?
Virtual person. I'll speak to that. It was my recommendation in trying to take constructive feedback from the board that there was a growing desire to return in person, and it seemed it was a admittedly somewhat subjective decision to say, okay, there's a balance here. There is value to virtual, there is value to in person. Okay, how about every other month? How about every once a quarter in person? Then there wasn't much more to it than that, Tim.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on Kohler's motion? Okay, all in favor of Kohler's motion, raise your hand and say aye. We're going to split vote here, so keep your hand up and hold it still. Let's get a count here. See, 6. Did I count 6?
Looks like Rachel's 7, is it?
I
1,
threw in
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And John Lee is 8, right? 1, 2.
Okay, we got the count, Graham.
Yeah, it is 8 in favor.
Okay, and just to be crystal clear, you are voting to amend the proposed resolution to move this from once a quarter as it's written to every other month, with the first in person being the January board month. Everybody's clear on that, right?
No, not the January month. It should start with February.
Sorry,
being
thank
the
you.
first in person, so that June will be in person as well.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're doing that. Okay, so continuing, all opposed to Kohler's motion, raise your hand up.
3.
All abstained.
And 1 abstention.
So 12, Graham?
That is correct, yeah, so.
Okay, the motion passes. All right, so back up. Oh. Joe, did you have a comment on
Yeah, and just to note that with our system, if someone can't make the in-person meeting, they can attend virtually. Correct?
That is correct.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so that motion passes. We are now, sorry, yes, go ahead, Sue.
Just a real quick question. Will staff please send us out one of the revised schedules so that we have that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. John Lee, go ahead.
And isn't there a limit to in-person? If you can't make it, if you can't make it, you can attend virtually. Don't we have a limit on that currently in the policy?
We don't. That's part of policy 111 that you will be reviewing and returning comments on to the Committee on Policies for our consideration. So that there is currently not a limit, but you can suggest that as part of your edits to policy 111.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so up to the outer shell here, and correct me if I have this wrong, but
Oh, you're right on it.
We are in discussion to approve resolution 2022-09 as modified by Kohler. Continuing that discussion, Rachel, you had your hand up before that was shelved. Would you like to resume that discussion, or are you good?
I think I still just like, I feel like most answers keep coming back to that's in this proposed policy that you haven't seen, that you will see at some point. And I guess I still, it just feels like we're trying to throw it together and without all this information in front of us, just like Tim said. And in some ways I don't care. It's not that big of a deal to me what we do. So part of me just wants to stamp it to say, let's do this just to get this issue passed. But it also feels like we're just don't have all the information we need to actually consider this.
Okay. Thank you for that comment. Joe?
Yeah, just to respond, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ted, or any other members of the committee, but the policy is more of a overriding long range idea, and it doesn't govern year to year. We're not writing a policy to say what we're going to do in 2023. We're given an overview of how we go forward from here. So I just don't think we should just get hung up on not having that big picture in relation to this vote. I hope that makes sense.
I think that's a good summary, Joe. I mean, we're required to have a resolution like this by our bylaws. And what policy 111 is going to do is allow us some flexibility to address issues with this resolution as it comes up over the course of the year, right? Something, global pandemic breaks out and you need to convert a meeting. That's the policy sort of creates that framework for amending this resolution. But this resolution will be required every year under our bylaws.
Okay. Dan, go ahead.
Yes, I abstained on that amendment because of a medical condition in my household that there's a possibility that I possibly will have to attend in-person meetings virtually at times. So I abstained to that. So I'm good with the schedule the way it is.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. John Lee, go ahead.
I move to accept the timeline proposal for 2023 election as presented.
Yeah, so that's the pending motion. And just to sort of clarify everybody, because John is right about the sort of Russian dolls issue going on. What we had was Tim's initial motion to modify this to have the CEO have the ability to convert any meeting to in-person or virtual. And then that was seconded. Then that motion was amended to change the schedule itself to every other year, and then that amendment would pass. So as
venue.
I see this, Tim's initial motion with his suggested change to the language is now pending with, if you're looking at page 59 of the board packet, with that grid box slightly different, with, you know, virtual and in-person being different, but other than that being the same. And that's the motion that's pending. So it would be, I guess, at this point, a motion to call that question. If somebody wants to move immediately to a vote.
Right. So before I call on you, Bob, John, I think what you're attempting to do is call the question. Which you're welcome to do or not, as the case may be.
Sure, I'll call the question.
Okay.
Do we have a second to call the question?
Second.
Okay.
So call the question, vote. We'll just need to go directly to vote on that. If there's 2/3 vote to call the question, that will end discussion and we'll go directly to vote.
Okay.
Now I get to clarify what exactly it's confusing. We have two amendments, right?
Yes,
They both passed.
Sorry. Well, yeah, they're both pending. So the document.
No, they're not
that staff
pending.
Presented.
They're both together. They're not pending, right? They're
No,
joined.
Yeah, I guess, yes. So Tim made a
Don't I
motion.
guess? Don't I guess? You got to be precise.
I'm precise. So Tim Wheeler made a motion to amend the presented resolution. So that was pending. Then that was subsidiarily amended. And then that amendment passed. So we're now back to Tim's original motion as amended by Kohler's motion. So staff presented a document at page 59. The underlying motion, the main motion, was made by Tim Wheeler to have some slight language change. That was seconded and under consideration when it was subsidiarily amended to change, as I'm looking at the document, this graph with different virtual and in-person. And then that amendment passed. So now we're back to the main motion, which includes Tim's original suggested language change and the change to the virtual versus in-person allocation.
Right. Okay. That's all I was clarifying is that both of those amendments that passed are now being voted on as a joint.
Yeah, correct. They're both pending together.
Yes.
So a vote in favor of this would be as the staff presentation on page 59 as amended by both Tim Wheeler's initial motion and Kohler McGinnis subsidiary amendment. Does everyone sort of track that? Okay, so then we should probably have our vote to call the question.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Bob, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just trying to navigate John so that he got the outcome I thought he was trying for. Okay,
that's fine.
Okay, so it's all in favor to call the question. Hold your hand up.
Aye.
All opposed. Okay, so the question is now called. So discussion ends. And now we will vote on the resolution. All in favor of the resolution as amended, hold your hand up and say aye.
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 All opposed. All abstained. Okay, motion passes as amended. And as a follow-up, Graham or Hillary, you want a staff member will send an update giving us our exact dates and whether they are in person or not in email, so we can all get that calendar. Yes.
Yes, Janelle and I will take care of that.
Terrific. Okay, thank you.
So can I ask one more real quick while we're on this?
Please go ahead.
So is October, you had said we would have a in-person in October. Is it isn't reflected that way. And I know we're not talking about that right now, but what is October going to be?
This October, Bob?
This October.
This October is in person.
Okay. It doesn't show that yet on the invites and all that. But.
Okay, good to know. So yeah, Janelle, can you please update the board's invites to make sure they all know it's in person?
Correct.
Thank you, Bob.
Yes.
Okay. All right, it is break time. So it is 10:48. You guys get a 12-minute break. I will see you all at 11 a.m. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. We are going to do some executive session. We have two matters and so we are, let's give Sue a moment here. Okay, all right, welcome back. Let's we're going to need a motion to go into executive session.
I move to go into executive session.
Ted, thank you. Second.
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, all in favor? Hands up. All opposed? Okay. Abstain. Thank you. Take a moment. Make sure you have your executive session link up.
Yeah, fine, and that's always fun.
Everybody good? Okay, we'll see you on the other side.
I'll be slightly delayed.
All right, okay, welcome back. Executive session is over. It is 12:15. It is lunchtime. Oh, nope. Let's take care of I'm sorry, let's take care of the possible board actions before we break from lunch while it's fresh in everybody's mind. So does anybody have a motion they want to make?
I think just real quick, I guess, under item 8A, we'd say we don't have any direct actions related to executive session, but we could clear up the record that we did have a brief discussion on some procedural matters at FERC that weren't originally listed. We can put that in our meeting minutes.
Terrific. Thank you for that.
And then we could probably move on to 9, I think is where we're going.
Yes.
Chair, I'll move. This relates to discussion in our executive session regarding the fast track board, and I'd like to nominate Ted Compton as the proxy to the fast track board for the LPEA board.
Get a second. Kohler, thank you.
Is that the right language, Graham?
Yeah, it would be appointment of Ted Compton as voting proxy to the fast track annual meeting. That's how we've noticed it as item 9.
Okay, so move. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Okay, is there a discussion? Okay, all in favor of vote, hold your hand up, say aye.
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 Okay, let's get a count here. Keep your hand up, please.
My hand should be there.
So,
John Lee is absent for this vote, correct? And okay, I think we've got that vote recorded.
It's unanimous with one abstention, I think.
Yeah. Or
thank you. All right, all opposed, hold your hand up. All abstained. Okay, motion passes. You get it all? Is there anything else coming out of executive session? Okay. All right, let's take a break. It is 12:17. I'm going to take back the 2 minutes you got earlier. We'll see you at 12:45. Okay, thank you. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. So Jessica's going to need to take off here in about 5 minutes. So last call, if you have anything specific for her that she can answer in 4 minutes and 58 seconds. Okay. Okay, so we finished up items 8 and 9. And we're going to move on to item 10. Do I have that correct? Yes. All right. So attorney report.
All right. Thank you, John. Submit my attorney report in writing and take any questions anybody has on it.
We should have just plowed through without lunch. Sorry. I didn't really think that through. Questions for Graham? Okay. All right, on to director reports. Roundup. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I'm back on the attorney report. So just a question on the PPA crossover. Time frame on that is where are we in terms of how close to sort of settling all the issues and having some draft that the board might look at some point?
This is largely, I think, getting ready to hand the pen over to crossover to get their turn at it, and we'll sort of see. We had some kind of related information that came up that Dan and I wanted to talk to Sarah about. That was what this sort of specific meeting with her was, in between the last board meeting and this board meeting. I think we're still, I think the next review will be largely crossovers response to our initial drafts and edits. So I don't think we're terribly far apart, especially I think, as I mentioned a few months ago, we were the template, as it were, that we were using was sort of the template that crossover was anticipating using themselves. And so I don't think we're gonna, I think we'll be able to get to pretty detailed negotiations pretty quickly on that.
So in terms of that process, so you get to detailed terms, everything, and then the board has a chance at some point to look at that, and then what possibility is there to make any changes if we've already gone through kind of getting to an agreed upon draft between those two partners? Or is there no role here? I mean, I think at the beginning,
I'll work with Sarah sort of on that, right? I think, I mean, a lot of this is, Sarah's expertise as on this market in general. She sort of knows how these PPAs look across a variety of situations. And so I would presume when it comes time to present this, that Sarah will likely take the lead on presenting that and be able to walk the board through that. And if there's a possibility for things to be negotiable, she can kind of work with you on that about what really specifically, is within the industry standard to negotiate or not. So that would be my anticipation, but I will circle with her on that and see sort of what level of board input on negotiations she would anticipate. I would think she would take the lead on that.
I guess my concern is to not get to some end and there's no room for time. Or, review doesn't necessarily mean, trying to build reject an agreement or accept it, but that there may be things that are offered by others who could review this. And I don't know that any of us have a real good context for this agreement? Is there a way to say, what are the key things that get negotiated? What do we do? How do these work? You know, we're in a process here that we've never really, I don't think anyone on this board's ever done before, maybe. But so how do we get ourselves up to speed on what's here? And maybe this isn't appropriate timing, but for that to happen. But I want to put a marker out there that sort of says, you know, what are key negotiable issues? What is just legal boilerplate that's protecting us or whatever? What are we really going to need to weigh in on? And do we have a primer or a context that would allow us to be smart about that?
Hey, so Graham, I'm going to jump in here. Tim, very excellent points, and that is our plan. We plan on actually hosting a COW on this issue because I think it deserves a lot of time to walk through. And to your point, what are the levers that we can move? What are the levers we really can't move? Another set of eyes from the board is always helpful, just in case we're missing something, right? So we've just been waiting. We're trying to get it to a point where we're kind of moving the levers according to our business principles of our strategic goals, objectives, but most importantly, making sure that we're also fitting in within our budget objectives. So, so my idea is that once we find out for sure where the FERC decision lies, that's when we can start locking in everything else. But we'll want to go ahead and schedule the committee of the whole to review this. And I'm just not sure when that will be. So it's coming. I think we just really need to get a clear indication on where FERC, how they're going to rule on this. We will know more this Friday, even on the CTP, because quite honestly, what if the CTP comes out lower than the BDP? We need to bring all that information back to the board to say, okay, here's another decision point for the board to consider. So does that help?
I think so. Yeah, I guess I'm asking for timing that we don't know whether or not we could, you know, we don't really know what the timing might be. I guess my central concern is, are we going to be given enough opportunity to learn what we need to learn, to ask the right questions, to understand those levers, and then time to deliberate or negotiate further if need be, before we have to come to a decision about accepting or not, right? So,
yeah,
you know, whatever the trigger points are, I want to just assure that we have those in there and that we agree that that's the kind of context that we would, or schedule that we would follow. So
yes, we'll make sure that happens for sure.
All right.
Because I agree with you. It's actually a good opportunity to inform the board on these power supply contracts, because you've never dealt with these before, being a full requirements of tri-state. And so I know Dan in particular loves to teach, so he will love to do this. So yes.
Right. And with this direct payment on the IRA thing, there's potential for more of these kinds of things for
That's right.
For LPEA. So okay.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, Graham, sorry to delay your report there.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Anything else for Graham? All right, round up. Who's up?
I think that's me this month. Roundup, business as usual. You saw there that we're continuing our work just to reflect on some of the ways that we operate and structure our funding. And so thanks to those of you who responded and gave us some thoughts and feedback. I think one question that was brought up that I just wanted to highlight, it was in the report, but I think it's a really good one. I know there's some follow-up here, but I want the public to hear it for anyone listening. But, you know, the Roundup group asked us or posed the question based on some of the grant applications we had, what is LPEA's strategy moving forward as it pertains to rooftop solar and some of those pieces, especially as we look at our larger power supply. So there's like what we're doing operationally and then how that ties in with rates or grants or the rest of it. And I don't think we need to, that this is not the venue to hash that out, but I just thought it was a great question that they raised. And I think that in talking with Jessica, it sounds like that is something we'll be tackling at some point. So any other comments, questions? Jessica, you want to add anything to that about the, okay. Great, Ted.
Thanks, Rachel. Mine is about the total funds available kind of question, and the data point I'm looking at is like the expense sheet shows a net income for the month. You know, more came in than went out. What's the Roundup board's feeling on making progress towards, or the ability to make progress towards spending some of the excess? You know, I mean, I'm asking that from, like, you know, the fact that I was there at one point and it was a focus, but sometimes it was a matter of not enough applications. So I wonder if there's not enough applications to give money to, or is it just a matter of the current board is sort of limiting the grants to kind of a traditional level that doesn't allow paying down? I mean, it looks like there's still, like, you know, sort of 60,000 quote unquote in the bank that could be a lower number if we were giving away more. So what are your thoughts on maybe getting to that point?
Well, Kirsten, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I know this month was an anomaly. So we have been spending down the excess consistently. And I highlighted that in the past board report, I think, just kind of where we had been to where we are. And I know this month in particular, we actually did have requests for more than we had funding, but one of those requests was not, I'm trying to pull up my report right now, but in the Roundup thing, but one of those requests was not something we could fund, if that makes sense. We sent it back to them, wasn't, or they pulled it back. That's what it was. They had pulled it back. So anyways, I think this month's an anomaly. Had that group kept their grant in the ring, we would have awarded, I'm sure, more than we have. And that said, I think there's work to be done on just outreach in general. And I know we've talked about that. And I think once we get through some of the structural stuff, which does include spending a little bit more down, then we'll actually hopefully tackle an outreach strategy.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Kristen, anything to add?
Yeah, got it.
Okay, Tim.
Thanks, Rachel. So I like two questions. One is on page 61 on the RU restructure. Or it says, what model supports diversification? And I'm curious what type of diversification are you looking for?
Yeah, Kristen, you want to take this one? We'll like go back and forth on responses, so it's not just me talking.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I know when the La Plata, I'm sorry, the Archuleta directors of LPEA got together, one diversification we were looking at was, let's not have everybody be a white female. So we actually got a Hispanic male, which was exciting, not too many males on there. So it's diversity of thought, diversity of gender, diversity of ethnicity, that kind of diversity. Basically, we're pretty white, we're pretty female.
Okay, thank you. And then does the Roundup take funds only from the LPEA Roundup program and our capital credits? There's no other sources of income or funding, and no one has ever, I mean, like, no one's ever donated or a grant or anything like that of our own that we've ever sought. Does it need more funding? Is sort of an ancillary to that question. Sounds like you're trying to spend more than more, so maybe not. But I was just curious. It's a foundation, right? So I assume a 501c3 of some sort. Typically, they seek more funding to be able to activate their mission. Is that not a focus of Roundup at all, apparently?
It has not been to date.
Yeah. I think, yeah, the one thing where this board has some, so to your point, outside sources hasn't been to date. There's not really we have staff assistance from LPA, but we don't have like an executive director or dedicated staff kind of moving the needle forward. It seems like it was created really to be the charitable arm of LPA. I would say on the board side of things where we have some sway, right, is on kind of allocating unclaimed capital credits and other things. And this is one area, oh, Carl's going to correct me. I said something wrong, but I would say one area just that I'll advocate for, and there is conversation and we're working on it actively now, is just this piece around the seat committee. These are those last minute funds to kind of, it's like the last ditch effort to save someone from homelessness, losing their housing typically, which then leads to all these cascades of things. And it's coupled with supportive services like financial coaching, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that pot of money within the community, because it's a coalition, is down, never has met the need that's there, A, and then B, need is up, and then C, community funding from other groups is down. So that's an area where there's a pretty big gap right now.
And I wouldn't correct that, Rachel, at all. You're absolutely right. There are a couple of other sources of funding beyond just the roundup in bills and what comes from unclaimed capital credits. I know those folks wish to remain anonymous, but there are some individual donors.
Yeah, the bylaws allow for that. Bylaws say the foundation shall accept all contributions made by members of LPA and may also solicit and accept contributions from other sources as deemed appropriate by the foundation board. So if somebody wanted to leave their estate to round up to distribute as a charitable foundation and the board deemed that appropriate to accept, they could accept those funds as well.
And that would be the Roundup board that would make that decision.
Correct. That would be the foundation board.
Right.
Is what it says, so Roundup board.
So at this point, funding capacity doesn't seem to be an issue, but there's nothing to prevent more funding capacity coming in.
Correct.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Good. Last call. Okay, Tri-State, Kohler, you're up. Kohler.
There we go. Sorry, I couldn't get unmuted for some reason. There is my report in the dockets. Not much I can add to it. This month was really a minimal meeting, one that I really was discouraged by. They tried a new experiment and not have the committee meetings, which was the executive committee meeting on the first day, and then the other 3 standing committee meetings on the next day, and then the board meeting. They didn't have those committee meetings, and those are important for me because they go into depth. You get a lot of very valid questions that are asked from other directors, and you get to find out if you're in alignment with the thinking from the documents that are provided to you as to what, where staff is and reality is. And that didn't happen. And the board meeting itself was actually less than 4 hours. It was a suggestion by the governance committee. So I did get a hold of the chairman of the governance committee, and he was very disappointed too, because he thought, okay, a day meeting would be a day meeting, not a 4-hour meeting. And he was the same way. So a lot of things, there's really very little discussion. Things just kind of, we breezed right through it. So a couple highlights I'll just mention real quick, and then I'll open it up. Tri-State did hit a peak as far as the load that they provided. Unfortunately, that didn't turn out as the bottom line. They're having a pretty ugly year as far as the bottom line goes. Most of it is with their expenses. Purchasing power and fuel are the big ones that are just clobbering them, but the inflation is also hammering them on different materials and getting stuff done. Also, Dwayne, one of the discussions that did happen at the meeting was the IRA, or the Inflation Reduction Act. And Dwayne was putting together a small team. They're going back to DC right after the meeting and talked to different legislators and stuff to try to help them direct how these funds go out. I mean, they passed it and said it's for the transition, you know, to renewables or whatever, but there wasn't really clarity on that. And so they were going to put their head, you know, their ticket in the basket and see if they can't get some influence on that. And then the other thing is that we are on track to close Rifle Station. Rifle Station is a gas operated generation plant. It gets used very, very little. It's the most expensive generation in the tri-state fleet. And its location is really, really poor. It doesn't serve where load needs to be served. So that's all I have, and I'll open it up for questions. And it looks like Rachel has got her hand up. So Rachel?
Yeah, I think something, I had two questions. One was about the Highline FreeWire EV charging station. It's like touted as this like potential rural solution when there's not a lot of three-phase power. Do you know anything about that? And like, is it just so new that
I don't. I really don't know about it. So I can't answer that, but I can see if I can find out more on it.
And Rachel, Dan, if Dan were on here, he would know about that. I mean, it's the simple answer when you look at it online is it uses it sort of long charges a battery that can discharge quickly. So, you know, it doesn't need to have, you know, fast charging capabilities going in, but it does have fast charging capabilities going out.
well, yeah, it was interesting technology, but I thought they kept touting it as like the rural solution, but then I noticed where this like test facility is on I-270 or something, where there's 8 bazillion cars and therefore volume. So it's like, from a business case, like, is that really a rural solution? But I guess my bigger question was, one, I've been thinking a little bit about this, and it definitely got brought up when Kirsten was speaking about the rate committee. And so it seems like Tri-State used to operate as, you know, a majority vote, inward we go, or onward we go. And now with FERC, it's almost like it's almost like a consensus process, right? Like all the co-op members need to agree, or else there's going to be a legal challenge. And then we all have to go through the FERC process. And I know Jessica highlighted this early on, that brings up so much spending. And in past months, I remember you, Kohler, mentioning like, yeah, Tri-State's really wanting to get some of the legal expenses under control because they're big and they keep going. And so strategically moving forward, you know, does Tri-State, have you all talked, or do they have some thoughts about how to do maybe some of that back end consensus building before they get to the FERC side of things? Or do they have a strategy for either cost mitigation and or like how best to get all 40, however many members we are, on the same page?
I would say that's ongoing all the time. They're always trying, like right now, they're in pretty deep conversations with United to try to find a mutual area where they can work with United, because to be very honest with you, United is probably the biggest hurdle for all the other co-ops right at the moment. And so that's what they're working on. But I think that's ongoing. And I also think that there's a big learning curve with FERC, because Tri-State's never been in FERC, and a lot of these things are new to them. And they're, you know, and the other thing that's really, really tough is the timetable, because, you know, with these FERC decisions, they can be years away, and there's fights all the way along there. And I think, again, that's another learning curve for the board as well as the staff at Tri-State, you know, because you're like, okay, when can we find this out? When can we do this? Just like what we're doing here. And it's just not happening. Now, as far as from my point of view, I think one of the key things is there still are major decisions done by the board, either before it goes to FERC or other things. And it's important to continue to build relationships. And one of the key things I'm doing now is trying to keep don't know exactly how to say this, but we used to be in real tight alignment with United. And United kind of went a direction and LPA kind of went a different direction. And I have to be real careful and work real hard that we don't get back, because right now, if you're associated with United to that board and to the staff as well, you aren't making friends, like what we talked about this morning, about having some friends with some of this rate development stuff. And so that's one of the big challenges right now, just trying to kind of build these relationships and working with everybody and seeing if we can't move forward. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but I do think in the background, there's a lot of work that's being done. Kirsten?
Yeah, Rachel, I think that having to be at FERC and knowing that if things are contested, it gets a lot harder is, at least on the rate committee, it's forcing people to try to meet in the middle sooner than later. So I find that helpful. Kohler, regarding United, United is always terribly happy when one of us sits at the table with them in an event. So I'm still trying to do that. So we're trying to do those, keep those relationships going all around. One of the things that United is doing, and I'd be interested if you could take this back to the Tri-State Board, they're reducing the size of their board. And they're also changing their term times. I think it's 4 years instead of 3. I forget how they're doing. And it's going to be a multi-year process. And I think Tri-State needs to start looking at changing the size of their board, especially since they don't have the regulatory responsibility that they had at once. They certainly have input into the regulatory responsibility, but it's still FERC in the end. So I think it's time for Tri-State to say, it's not, it's got either got to be regional, or I don't know what it's going to be, but what it is now is just too cumbersome. If we thought 5 was too, or 7 was too cumbersome, we know that 42 is too cumbersome. I think 12 is too cumbersome for us too, but we'll take that up next year.
Here, here.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, I'll turn it back over to you, John.
Okay, thank you. Pushing on, fast track. Covered a lot of ground already, but do you have an update for public discussion?
Yeah, similar to what Kohler said, I have the written report, so if anyone would like me to answer any questions, or if they have any comments, be happy to take those. All right, I guess not.
Terrific. Okay, thank you. CREA.
Great, thank you, Director Witchell. CRA did not have a formal meeting since the last month's LPEA board meeting, so I did not have anything to write up in the board packet. One of the exciting things, though, that I think is finishing up is the NRECA International program, where Colorado and Oklahoma bonded together to send a team of linemen to electrify a village in Guatemala. So they were able, I don't know what the numbers are, but a fair amount of homes and schools and whatnot were electrified. And they have some really nice pictures of like the lineman holding a child, flipping a switch, and, you know, stuff like that. So quite exciting stuff. And the thing that I really like about the program is that every single one of our people from the states that participates, they come back with life-changing stories. You know, they don't understand quite, you know, how good we have it sometimes until you are able to help, you know, another group in that direction. Anyway, nothing else really of real concern from CRA perspective. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions? Well, I sincerely appreciate you all. Thank you so much.
Terrific. Thank you, Holly. Western United.
Nothing to report. 11 October is the next meeting up in Brighton.
Okay. Thank you, John. Tri-State Rate Design Committee, we have covered that. No need to revisit. Okay. Last call. You guys getting out 15 minutes early. All right, thank you so much. Sorry, Dan Huntington, go ahead, please.
I just wondering about the fair report. John, you promised one last meeting that you'd have us a report.
I'm sorry, you broke up a fair report?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
county fairs.
County fair report.
Oh, you mean John? John, Lee,
Sales.
sorry.
John, Lee, yes.
Like,
Yeah, so it should be in the packet next month. I didn't get it off of my iPad in time to get it into the packet. You'll be able to read it in the next one.
excellent. Thank you. Kirsten.
Yeah, I know we're in person next month. I'm gonna be on the East Coast, so I'll be doing virtually. But I hope you guys have fun. But I'll be there, kinda.
You'll be there. Excellent. All right. Well, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for your time and your effort. We will see you around town.
Be safe.